Polish builder Galeon currently produces about 27 boats across 5 product lines, and there's loads of good stuff to enjoy amongst that. We've got the GTO open boats, we've got the sports cruisers, we've got the hardtops, we've got the skydecks, but arguably where Galeon has been at its most ingenious and its most crowd pleasing is in the form of its Flybridge models. They span everything from 30 feet to 80 feet, but we're delighted that today down here in Ocean Village, Galeon's new UK distributor, Argo Yachting, has invited us down to take a look at this, the new Galeon 440 Fly. Now it's fair to say with a Flybridge cruiser of relatively compact dimensions that does all those good things aft with relatively heavyweight gear for that beach club with the fold down bulwarks and the hydraulic aft platform, I'm not expecting tremendous things from the drive, particularly as we got the 440 horsepower shafts back there. I've tested previous Galeons where sometimes, particularly on the open boats, there's a little bit too much going on aft, and you feel that when you get up to speed. But I have to say, in terms of weight distribution, this thing feels fantastic, as I'll illustrate right now. Now we'll get her up to speed nice and slowly so I can make the points that I want to make. Now first of all, as we just ease forward gently, well, we're doing 5 knots now. I can push that through to 6, 7, 8, 9 knots, and all the while my visibility forward is fantastic because that nose is not elevating at all, and that's a trait actually that you see right throughout the transition to plane, which is really impressive, particularly as I've taken off the zip wake automatic controls, because I want to see just how the hull performs. And another thing to note actually while we're doing around about 8 knots here is, well, look at this, look at the directional stability of this. It's absolutely rock solid. There's no corkscrewing of the thing at all as you make your way down the channel. As I get up to speed a little bit more, well, again, we're pushing through 10, 11, 12 knots now, up to 13. A little bit of bow lift, but really nothing substantial at all. And again, I've not got the auto tabs on. If I want, I can drop those tabs just a touch, just to bring that nose down a little, but really the running attitude is very natural and very progressive on this thing. You can really enjoy pretty much any speed throughout that band without feeling like you're pointing the nose skywards and burning unnecessary fuel. Now today we don't have any data as regards our fuel flow, which is a bit of a shame because I'd like to see how efficient this boat really is. But what we tend to expect from these engines would be around about 120 litres per hour at about 3,250 RPM. Now at that speed we're doing about 22, 23 knots. We got a pair of 850 litre tanks, so we're working with about 1,350 usable litres. I'll just spin her around again. Keep out of the way of the traffic. So that means that with about 5 or 6 litres per nautical mile we can expect in excess of 250 nautical miles of range at that kind of cruising speed. Now we're topping out today at about 27.5 knots. And the guys here tell me that it should be good for around about 28, 29 knots with this engine rig. But it's been sitting in the water a little while, so I expect there's a bit of weed on the hull there, just slowing us down, adding a bit of drag. But you'll notice, even with relative elevation of that Flybridge, windage feels relatively modest too. It's a very, very easy boat to drive. It feels relatively weighty and relatively sedate, as you'd expect, but it just helps it to feel that little bit more grown up. And it's actually quite a pleasure to drive it in terms of the handling too. There's plenty of heel, as you can see when I swing around to starboard. And that, of course, is accentuated when you operate in this boat from up on the Flybridge. And then when you come back onto the straight, back it comes into its natural trim. It's just very, very easy. Now, in terms of the visibility, I've said it's fantastic, and it is through that one-piece screen forward and because of the natural trim of the boat. And it's also fantastic here. We got this massive door to the side of me, absolutely huge, about as big as I've seen on a boat of this kind, a boat of this scale. And this is genuinely pleasant, because this doesn't just enable me to get ventilation and to talk to people dockside. On a pleasant day, you can actually relax into the drive, settle yourself back, and feel like you've got a proper open boating experience. That's how big this aperture is. Anyway, it's about 4 degrees today, so I'm going to close that back up. Up here in the main part of the dash, there's only the one cup holder. We've got our VHF and we've got our notebook just there. So my water has to be positioned behind me here, which is not ideal. I'd like another couple of cup holders up at the dash. But there's a cleanliness to this arrangement that I genuinely enjoy. Now, it's not particularly spec'd up on this test model. We've just got one 12-inch plotter, but there's plenty of space for a pair of 15-inch plotters plus the engine displays. We got the vital switchgear just down below here. Even though we have these big swollen forward mouldings on this hull that threaten to flirt a little bit with swells and wakes, I have to say, it does a really good job. I mean, as long as you don't put the thing sideways into a swell, the softness of ride is perfectly serviceable, and actually the hull does fling most of the water well wide, so it's relatively dry. I've been quite surprised by that. Now back to the dash itself. As I say, there's plenty of space for you to spec up the electronics. We have the bow thruster here on the left hand side, the throttles and the zip wake here on the right. And we also got a little bit of red light here. You'll see an ambient glow from beneath the dash, plus a couple of red lights up there. So you can use this boat for a bit of night nav without actually blinding yourself. And the steering position here, in terms of comfort, well, it pretty much mirrors what this boat is all about. It's not a performance boat. Of course it's not. It's never going to be as a boat of this scale, with this kind of volume, with those kinds of engines, and this kind of weight. So what they've done is pretty much the same as they've done up top. A nice relaxed 2-man bench. There's no adjustability at the wheel, but you can adjust this bench seat itself backwards and forwards. So of course, when you want to have a more active drive, you can just shift yourself to the leading edge of that and get a bit more involved. And when you're on a longer passage, stick it on autopilot, settle yourself back, and it's really genuinely comfortable place to be. So in terms of the helmet experience, no, not the most exciting thing in the world, but given what this boat offers in terms of its volume, its accommodation, its day spaces and its flybridge, I have to say it performs in all regards exactly as I had hoped it would. Now this boat is 45 feet and 10 inches in length, and that puts it towards the middle of that 9-strong Flybridge fleet. But you'll see as you walk around this boat that Galeon has worked really hard to maximise every spare inch. That's very much a Galeon trademark, and it all starts on this platform with a very bold design decision. Now that's in the saloon. It's a 2-tier saloon, and they've pushed the galley forward opposite the 2-man helm, so that's your workmanlike patch, and it's quite a small part of the boat, and literally everything else is then given over to the needs of sociability. Now it's a 14-man boat, so we need loads of seating, and you'll see we've got plenty of that back here. But we start at the aft end at the swim platform, because Galeon wants to take its beach club concept onto ever smaller boats, so it's no surprise to see that we have exactly that here. Now this platform, as you can see, we've got drain slots here, we've got a kind of inset ladder, so that when this hydraulically drops down and slightly aft, this then gives you a nice gradient to get down to it for water sports and so on. It's big enough and strong enough to handle a Williams 280, so that's quite a handy size of tender. We've got a built-in ladder here, a telescopic ladder that folds out. We've got the shore power over here on the starboard side, and we've also got the mixer tap and the transom shower there. But this is really where the fun begins. If we lift this lid up, you see we've got a tremendous size of wet bar right here at the stern. And of course, when you deploy this platform, this cannot be used. So you might deem that a bit of a flaw, but at the same time, it's a tremendous size. We've got an electric griddle here, a bit of work surface, a sink in the centre, and more work surface over on the starboard side, plus an additional deeper sink here, which quite possibly is refrigerated. Down below here, we've got extra storage spaces. This goes all the way through, so we've got a couple of little hatches here, and that's ideal for your lines and your fenders. And actually, while we're opening these, it's worth noticing this little curve in the mouldings. It's quite a classy little touch. It just looks very cool, looks quite premium, and that's not necessarily something that we tend to associate with Galeon, but it really does look the part. This is permateak, incidentally, and that's obviously a more practical solution than natural teak. It's also easier to get hold of. There are no supply issues, and it means that you can have both the wood and the caulking in pretty much any colour you like. So it's very easy to customise from that perspective. Now let's shut this back up and make our way into the cockpit itself. We've got symmetrical decks to access the cockpit. And when you get in here, the big news, of course, are these big drop-down bulwarks. Now we've seen these on Galeons in the past. The beam here, when they're in the elevated position, that's about 13'9", but you can add an additional 7 foot, so more than 50% to that beam, simply by dropping these down. And if I move over to the starboard side, you'll see that we've got good rails on the top to make your way fore and aft. And we also have these lovely glass sections, glazing sections built in there. So when you're sitting down at seat level, you can see through those to the sea, kind of opens the space up. And of course, when they're deployed and horizontal, it means that when you're sitting on top of them, you can look directly down at the water. In terms of the basic layout back here, we've got a big asymmetrical L-shaped settee, but of course, there's more to this space than meets the eye, and that's pretty much what you'd expect from Galeon. For a start, we've got these excellent little slide-out gates for extra security rather than the kind of sticky lift-up ones that are sometimes a bit awkward to use. And on the starboard side of this L-shaped settee, we've got a reversing backrest. So if we swing that over, I can pop myself in the space, and with that bulwark folded down, I've got a lovely big expansive view of the water from there. But it goes further as well. I think you're likely to be quite impressed by these doors at the aft end. If we just open up the port one in the conventional fashion, and we can just pin that down into the deck, there we are. Then we come over here to this one, lift that up, slide it across, and then we can fold that out so that is flush with that port door. Lock that into place. Instantly, you're opening up the seating in the aft cockpit. Let's swing that just back over. You're opening up the seating in this aft cockpit to the seating in the internal saloon. And there's a couple of things you can do with that. Now, again, we've got a reversing backrest here, so I can sit here and I can face the guys on that aft table. But there's another trick. If I lift that back over and get down on my hands and knees, we've got a little peg that secures this into the deck, and if I lift that up, then the theory goes that this swings round on runners so that you kind of have an unbroken and continuous seating section. As I say, this is a boat for 14 people, and you can pretty much seat them all here, particularly as we've got additional seating on the port side facing across to these guys. And for my money, even though you've got access through to the side deck, this is slightly imperfect in that it's a little bit more staggered than I'd like. I'd like it to sort of marry up with the existing furniture and to be a proper unbroken bench seat. And to be honest, you'd kind of expect that from Galeon, after all their ingenious little features on various other Flybridge models in the past. But it's a decent feature, and again, once you've got it out there, you can reverse that backrest, and with that bulwark down, you've got another seat for facing out towards the sea. Now, it's a happy coincidence that the more elevated these bulwarks are, the more secure they are, and also the more elevated they are, the more extra beam you get when you fold them down. So that works in a good couple of ways. And as I make my way further forward down these side decks, you'll see I'm not a big fella, but I'm banging knees and brushing shoulders on various structures here because the side decks are quite narrow. Now I'll take that because it generates extra volume in that saloon. So let's move on further forward, up a couple of steps. And when you get to the foredeck, well, if those side decks are a bit narrow, all is forgiven up here because the beam comes a long, long way forward. And you see these angular little mouldings and just cut in right at the very forepeak. It's a really prodigious bow flare, or at least it appears to be, but actually it's not quite the traditional bow flare because the hull follows suit with kind of mouldings that swell at the forward edge just to generate extra volume down below. And there's a couple of other touches up here that are quite clever. We've got cup holders here with little drainage channels that run under these cushions and out through the leading edge of this moulding, so there's no standing water. If I move round to this side, you'll see that this is a 3-part island sunbed as well, and each individual headrest can come up and be anchored in one of 3 kind of angles, so that's quite comfortable. This central section also hides a set of skylights for extra light down below, and also of course you can open those to stick stuff down into that forward cabin if you like. And this little unit here is also quite pleasing. If we lift up this cushion, we see we've got a little hatch here, lift that up, and in here we've got a little backrest, fold it all back down, and just like that you've got an additional 2-man seat facing forward with very well placed grab rails, so you can come up here and relax when the weather and the water allows. Now there's also plenty of storage, easily accessible with one hand beneath these bench seats aft, but your 14 guests will also be pretty delighted to know that if they want to change the scenery, the Flybridge is also pretty enormous. Now part of the reason that this Flybridge feels so big is because as down below it's kind of lined with peripheral seating, and that really works up here. So we have this table here in the centre, we've got a little pull-out bracket here so we can extend that way aft. We've also got this fold-out section here, again we've got a pull-out bracket so we can pull that into the centre. And then up at the helm we use this twin helm seat as well with a reversing backrest. So there's easily space here, I'd say, for 10, maybe 11 people, plus of course around the leading edge here we got space for another 3, so you genuinely can, not that you should or would, but fit the entire ship's company of 14 up here just as you can down on that sociable aft saloon and cockpit space. Now it's quite thoughtful of Galeon that they've got this additional leaf so that you can leave that one in just to preserve the companionway fore and aft. And it's good to see that we also have the option of a wet bar unit up here as well. And what we have in this configuration is a nice big chopping board with a sink underneath that, plus an electric griddle. We have no gas on board this boat, and that's not an option either. Underneath we've got an extra bit of storage plus a fridge. But of course, if you want an ice maker, then this is the place to spec it. As for the helm station, if I fold this back over, well, this is relatively simplistic, much like the lower helm in fact. We have the wheel, we've got a 2-man seat, we've got your throttle and your zip weight controls, a single 12-inch plotter, the engine display, and then just your most essential switch gear plus your bow thruster. Now you'll see there's no stern thruster on this boat. Well, the bow thruster is an option, and given that this boat is actually shaft driven, you'd anticipate that most people will want to opt for the stern thruster as well. If we head back down now and pop into the saloon itself, you'll see that the clever design ideas from the Galeon design team very much continue. Now, as I say, this entire lower level of the saloon is given over utterly to seating and to the needs of the guests in terms of parties. Now, we have a table here that could be extended with a little bracket underneath, but we also have a telescopic leg. That means you can drop this into the space. We've got an infill that's currently stowed down below, and you can use this as an occasional double berth. And actually on this boat that works particularly well because we've got a galley up here on the higher level and we've got a huge skipper's side door, and that means that if you're sleeping down below in one of the main cabins, you can get up and make breakfast, make a coffee, you can head out onto that side deck and head ashore without having to walk through the section of the boat where your extra guests are sleeping. So that makes loads of sense to me. It might make even more sense, in fact, if there was some sort of option for a partition curtain that came across here, just to cordon off those spaces a bit better. But what also makes sense to me here is the port side. Now, as I say, On a boat of this scale that attempts so much, you do get elements of compromise where one space kind of juts into another, and that's exactly what we get here with the Flybridge steps. So rather than just waste what might otherwise be dead space, they've used this for your main distribution panel down below, and ahead of that we've got this bench facing across to the main dinette with a TV, again optional, that lifts out of the back there so you can watch telly from the starboard side. But let's head up to the elevated level, the forward part of the saloon, and take a look at what we have up here. Now, generally throughout this saloon, and actually throughout the boat, the options are extraordinary. So the worktop, there are plenty of options for that. This apparently is Eucalyptus Nero. That's one of 10 wood types you can have. They're all veneer on ply, but you can have those in satin or gloss, so you can have that feeling very much bespoke. And if I look down at the decking, well, we've got carpet here, or so it seems, but we've also got a contrasting wood floor. So you can have wood floors, you can have carpeting, you can have a mix of the two. And the same goes, if I move over here, for these trims. You can have various vinyls, various finishes, leather or vinyl in fact, so you really can make this space feel your own. Now at the galley, it's a pretty decent galley, I have to say, particularly given that Galeon has been quite reluctant to lavish too much space on this section of the boat. You get everything you need. We've got a good size of double sink there, stainless steel, with a little receptacle here for this lid, and that's probably fine at anchor, but it's quite shallow, so you want to be doing that while you're out on a rolling sea. We also have a little bin back here, and an electric hob, an induction hob there, and no options for gas on this boat. Microwave down on the lower level, and a really good size of fridge. And as you can see, another nice bit of attention to detail, a little cutout on the work surface, just so you can access that with your fingers without pinching them between the two. And what I also like here, aside from the fact that it's a good elevated height of galley workstation, is the fact that the high level storage is properly high level. So as a 6-footer, I can stand fully upright and I can still see everything directly beneath that. So that works very well for me. In terms of engines, we've got options here, as you would expect. There's quite a compact hatch to access the engine room down below. And if we head down there, there's a dedicated ladder, a decent bit of space between those engines. And there's actually quite a lot of volume down here, and the reason for that is that we've got shaft drives, straight shafts on this particular model. Now, you can have D6 440s with shafts, you can have D6 480s with shafts, or you can have IPS 650s. I mean, this obviously is the lowest powered version. You can expect around about 29 knots with this apparently. You can push that to 30, 31 knots with the more powerful shaft drives, or with the IPS drives around about 32, 33 knots, although that's speculative for the time being because they haven't actually tested one out here in the UK. But certainly with this fit out, there's loads of space for all sorts of things, including a seakeeper should you want one, though I imagine that there might be relatively few takers for a boat of this scale. On either side of the engines, we've got a pair of fuel tanks. They're 850 litres each, so a good bit of capacity for a decent cruise. And if I just spin myself and face aft, well, again, lots of space. We've got the generator back there in the starboard quarter. In the central part, we've got the various battery banks, both domestic and starter. And then on the port side, we've got a good space there for the air conditioning and heating unit. Now, one of the key decisions you've got to make with this boat is whether to have 2 or 3 cabins. Now, if you have 2 cabins, you obviously have a full beam mid cabin. You have a good generous size of forward cabin, both of which can be used as owners' cabins, and you have a bathroom, one on either side. But what we have here is the 3 cabin version. So we've got that mid cabin, we've got a reduced size of forward cabin, we've got a lovely twin cabin on the port side, and then we've got 2 bathrooms, both of a smaller size, on the starboard side. Now, given that the mid cabin is largely similar in either configuration, we'll start back here. Now, of course, on the 3 cabin boat, which is what we're testing today, this would be your owner's cabin, and it's all arranged around a good size of central double bed that runs fore and aft. We also have big storage units on both sides, loads of storage here in fact, so I'd be quite keen to investigate the idea either of a nice intimate little breakfast table, which I've seen on other Galeon flybridges, or of a chaise longue or a settee on one side or other, perhaps a dressing table too. There seems to be decent space for it. Now, of course, we don't have standing headroom, as you can see, because there's a great deal going on above us, but we do have little elements like this where the deck head raises to about 7 feet, where you've got a good sort of space to change. This of course is where a TV will go, and we also have plenty of space on either side of this bed to move around and to jump into your side of the bed unimpeded. And although we have again a dropping deck head here, it's beautifully styled. You've got all sorts of materials and fabrics and lighting configurations you can choose. And as I say, Galeon is very much a production manufacturer, but at the same time, if you're happy to wait an extra few months, an extra year or so, and visit the factory, there's all kinds of additional ways you can use to customise it and make it feel more bespoke. And this is very attractive indeed. And there's still just about, if I get myself in here, just about room to sit beneath this, sit up in bed and have a read. And I have to say, one of the greatest strengths of this cabin, peculiar though that sort of variation in deck head seems to be, and deck level actually, is the light. These windows are absolutely vast, and from bed level you get massive views on both sides. Now if I stroll forward past these two starboard bathrooms and into the forward cabin, things are really quite interesting. Now this does change on this 3 cabin model. So we've got this bulkhead moved a decent distance forward to accommodate those 2 starboard bathrooms. We've also got this bulkhead moved a little forward to accommodate our twin cabin on the port side. So in order to accommodate those shifting bulkheads, or rather than have a central island bed, they've shifted that to starboard on an angle, which gives you extra space on the port side here, so you don't feel hemmed in. I've got to say, it works pretty well, and the reason for that, as much as anything, is this. Now these sections, you'll see these very clearly on the front of the hull, and we've seen them on other boats in the Galeon range. So where the bow flares, or the hull flares in tandem with that, so you get little hull projections on both sides. It gives you extra breadth and extra volume, extra light, better views, and it feels really very impressive in here. Again, we've got lots of kind of artistic, creative lighting, and again we've got plenty of creative finishing here at the bed head. Again, there are plenty of options there, and there's a decent amount of storage in here too. Lots of hanging storage and automatic lights, and I particularly like the way that a lot of these storage spaces are lined with soft touch fabrics. That's a very nice little touch. It sort of deadens the noise and makes things feel a little bit more luxurious. And also it's worth noting while we're in here that when you operate in these doors, where you don't get sticking out catches that kind of catch your clothing on the way past, if I close that over, really satisfying clunk. It's actually a really strong magnet in there, so it shuts very solidly and eliminates rattles underway. So that's a really clever little solution. So what I want to do now is head over to the port side and take a look at this bunk cabin. And it's really quite interesting, because if the other 2 main cabins are compromised in various ways in order to generate the space for this, well actually, as bunk cabins go, this is fantastic. Now we have plenty of storage in here. That's currently filled up with the infill for the Saloon dinette. But what this is really all about is this window. It's absolutely huge, full length and plunging. So if I jump up here, you'll see that when I stretch myself out as a 6-footer, well, you just couldn't ask for better sea views than this. The only problem you're going to get, of course, is the fact that the 2 people staying in here, certainly if they're your kids, are going to squabble non-stop about who gets the top bunk, because of course down under there there's no window at all. But it's just a really impressive feature, I have to say. Plenty of storage, great light, great views, nice big beds, and very comfortable. So let's pop across to the starboard side now and take a look at the other slightly compromised area of this lower deck, which is of course the bathrooms. Now we'll take the forward one first, because that's where we happen to be. Now this of course is your day heads as well, and what we have is the toilet inside the shower compartment itself, just to maximise use of space. That's inevitable. We do get a rain shower up above though, and a really big mirror, plus again some of the biggest windows you're likely to see in a boat of this size, extending right through into the shower compartment, and again more high level storage, which is very welcome. And we'll take a look at the final space on this lower deck, which is the ensuite for that owner's cabin aft. Now again, what we have in here is generous headroom, a rain shower, nice recessed LED strip lights, plenty of natural light as well from these big, deep, full-length hull windows. And here we do have space to separate the toilet out from the shower, and we also get a nice little seat inside that shower so you can have a more decadent wash in the morning. Now the base price for this boat is €840,000 including VAT, but of course to see this model at its best you've got to spec it up as the test boat has been. So you might want a bimini up top on that flybridge, you might want bow and stern thrusters, I think most people will. But what you're definitely going to want is those fold down bulwarks, and you're going to want that hydraulic aft platform. You're going to want to maximise its potential as a boat with a proper beach club, so that inflates the price. But what I've been really impressed with here today is the fact that in spite of the fact we have all that extra weight aft and all this extra kit on board, there's no obvious dynamic compromise in terms of the way this boat drives, and that's probably got a lot to do with the fact that this boat uses shaft drive, so it shifts a lot of weight forward. But either way, what's really interesting here is the fact that the model above this, the 480, is less than 10% extra in terms of price, and that brings you a more versatile aft end, particularly in that saloon, because the windows slide aside and you have reversible backrests that enable you to face out from the internal settees across those fold down bulwarks, and you also have a fold out bar, so it really ramps up that recreational versatility. And that leads me to believe that a lot of people who express an interest in this particular model, excellent though it is in a lot of surprising ways, might find themselves tempted just to push the envelope and find the extra cash to buy the bigger boat in this fleet.